Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam, Trilokyam Sacharacharam, Tat Padam Darshitam Yena, Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata cha Pita, Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha, Tvameva Vedya Dravinam, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So we're in our discussion of the Manomaya Kosha, the mental sheath. And the important points to cover is that the mind is the world and the world is the mind. Vedanta thunderously declares that this phenomenal world is nothing but consciousness appearing as name and form. Stop the mind and you stop the world. And we talked about that paradigm that I lifted from Yoga Vasishta of the three elements that we can say comprise our mind, that comprise our ignorance. The first is what we call Jiva Bhavana, this attitude, this belief that I'm a person. And as soon as I'm in that place, it's like a deep hypnotism or like a dream-like state. There's always a sense of lack. And then the world of name unformed that I see is separate from me. And it has joy-giving and misery-producing qualities. The third element is struggle, kartavya. I have to get from point A to point B in order to be okay. I'll be happy when it'll be better if. That's the mind, that's the world. And if we undo that mechanism, this is what other scriptures will call manonasha, the destruction of the mind. This doesn't mean you're sitting in the corner drooling in your diaper. It means this fundamental ignorance has been destroyed. The other point that the scripture made was both bondage and liberation occur to the mind, the self is ever free. What is my bondage? Nothing more than the deeply rooted conviction, rooted in my ignorance, that I'm my body, or my body plus the personality. What is liberation? The deeply rooted conviction in the mind. Not that I'm a great Mahatma, not that I'm a realized soul. Aham Brahmasmi, but that I'm Brahman, I'm that ground being. I'm not a person. And that occurs to the mind, not the self. Any questions about this before we go on? All right, and I think we're now on verse 179, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, Ganesh, will you help us out, please?
Adhya sadoshat purushasya samsritihi adhya sabandha sattvam aneva kalpitaha rajastamo dosha vato vivekino janmadi dukkhasya nidanametat. The evil of superimposition causes man's transmigration, and the mind alone is responsible for the bondage of superimposition. For a man who's tainted with rajas and tamas and who lacks discrimination, this causes the misery of birth, etc.
Yes. So we have an introduction. We have this in a couple verses back to the term adhyas, superimposition. We actually have anyonya adhyas, which means mutual superimposition. I superimpose upon the self the qualities of the not self, and I superimpose upon the not self the qualities of the self. What do I mean by that? What I am is witnessing consciousness, pure awareness that is birthless, changeless, and deathless. But because of spiritual ignorance, I superimpose upon that these false ideas. I'm my body. And along with that comes, I'm tall, I'm short, I'm man, I'm woman, I'm old, I'm young, I'm fat, I'm skinny, or the more subtle ones, I'm good, I'm bad, successful, I'm not successful, I'm stupid, I'm smart, I'm important, I'm not important. All these ideas, which in fact are qualities of the body, mind, intellect, I superimpose upon myself. Now, the phenomenal world of name and form is essentially shunyata, void, just a picture show. So I superimpose sat. That stuff out there really exists and it's separate from me. Chit, those people are conscious sentient beings, separate from me. And ananda, that person, place, thing, or situation is where the bliss is. That person, place, thing, or situation is where the misery is. So I superimpose my sat, my chit, my ananda into a world that is void. Now, all this becomes easy to understand if we go to the dream state. I say frequently, you are the God of your dreams. If you really understand what goes on in the dream state, Vedanta becomes very clear. So what happens? First thing that happens, you go to bed and you have a condition called ignorance. Or we can call that state deep sleep. What is the condition of deep sleep? I know nothing. Avarana Shakti, veiling power. Then comes the dream, Vikshepa Shakti, projecting power. And into the dream, there's a dream body and a dream ego identified with it. And I have a locus of perception there. I see the elements of the dream from the dream body. Sometimes I have like a sense of an omnipresent observer of the dream, but most of the time I'm identified with the dream body. And the people, places, things, and conditions in the dream seem separate from me and real. To the dreamer, the dream world seems just as real as our waking state world does to you and me. But upon awakening, poof, the dream is gone. Oh, that was so vivid. It seems so real, but I know it's not. How? Because I have negated it. It's disappeared. It's no longer available. So what finally convinces the mind about the unreality of the individual self and the world is when the mind stops. Not like deep sleep, but stops. Then there is no individuality and no phenomenal world. We see by direct experience that they are temporary, they're transient, they are dream-like. You can say we wake up from being awake. So it is this superimposition that makes me believe that I'm my body. It is the superimposition that makes me believe that the world out there is other than just the play of consciousness. And that's what we need to undo. Any questions on this before we go on? 180, next one.
अतः प्राहुर्मनोविद्यां पंडितास्तत्त्वदर्शिनः येनैव भ्राम्यते विश्वं वायुनेव प्रमण्डलम्. Hence, the mind is considered to be avidya by sages who have discovered its secret. By this alone, the universe of experience is tossed around like the clouds by the wind.
So what is my ignorance? It is the mind. Remember how we defined mind. 1, I think I'm a person. 2, there's a goal separate from me. And 3, I struggle toward it. The problem is not the perception of the world. The problem is I believe that it's real. For example, you can close your eyes and imagine a mango. You know it's imagination. But if you dream it's a mango, to the dreamer, the dream mango is real. So what is it that we need to accomplish? We need to quit believing the mind. Swamiji used to thunder in satsang. Shut up and get out. People would want to get up and leave the satsang hall, but he didn't mean that. Stop the mind. Get out of the mind. You ever be the untouched, uninvolved knower. Next one.
Tanmanashrodhanam karyam prayatnena mumukshuna vishuddhe sati chaitasmin mukti karaphalayate. Therefore, the mind must be diligently purified by one who seeks liberation. When the mind has been purified, liberation becomes as readily available as a fruit in one's own hand.
So it's not that we need to purify the mind and then engage in some other process to realize the self. The example I like to use frequently, it's like when you take your shower in the morning, and if you live in an old building like I do with no fan or vent, steam is in the bathroom. So if I look at my face in the mirror right after the shower, you can't see it. So what must I do in order to see my face? I must remove the steam. How? I can open the door. And in time, the mist clears and my face is very clear. I don't then need to do something to make reflection available in the mirror. Likewise, achieve a pure mind. A pure mind is not a goody-goody mind. It doesn't mean I have good thoughts as opposed to bad thoughts. It means I have fewer thoughts. It's like the no filter commercials you see on TV. Tap water has, I think they say, 210 particles. The Brita filter has 110. But the no filter, or zero filter, has 0. How do we achieve 0 filter for the mind?
Viveka.
Just get out of the mind. Let go of attachment and identification. Quit believing in the reality of the thoughts. And in the space between the thoughts, see if you can notice who or what knows the thoughts and the space between the thoughts. Next verse.
Atah prahurmano vidyam panditastatvadarshinaha yenaiva bhramyate vishvam. Oh, I've already read that one. Mokshaikasakya vishayeshu ragam nirmulya samyasya cha sarvakarma sachadhaya yah shravanadi nishtho Rajasva bhavamsa dhunoti budhe. With single pointed devotion for liberation. He who roots out his attachments for sense objects, renounces all actions, and with faith in truth, constantly hears the truth, etc. He can purge the Rajasic nature in his intellect.
So now Shankara says, how do we achieve this purity of mind? Having single pointed devotion to the process. The willingness to give up my attachments to all enjoyments gained through the senses. My willingness to give up all identification with any form of self. Then Shravana, hearing the scriptures. Mananam, thinking about it. Then dhyana, long and continuous meditation on the self. This is the process. Next verse.
Manomayo napi bhavet paratma hyadhyantya bhakpat parinami bhavat dukkhatmakatpat vishayat vahetoh drashta hi drashyatma tayana drishtaha. The mental sheath cannot be the supreme self either, for it has a beginning and an end. It is subject to modifications, pain and suffering. Pain and suffering characterize it, and it is an object of cognition. The subject can never be identified with the object of knowledge.
So we go back to our larger frame of the discussion, where he's going to elaborately talk about this discrimination between the self and the not self. So the mental sheath cannot be the self. I am not my mind. Why? Because it has modifications. I'm happy, I'm sad. I suffer, I have joy. How do I know? I am the witness of all these mind states. It rises and it falls. So the conditions of the mind are objects of cognition. One feeling can't see another feeling. I know them all. I am not the Manomaya Kosha. Now, for some yogis, it is important to go through stages of some sort of psychological process. Of course, I would never, ever discourage someone from going to psychotherapy or going to do ACA work, adult children of alcoholics, or any of those other therapeutic devices to help heal an ulcerated mind. But in the end, what we want to know is, okay, drop it. Cast all of that stuff off. I am not the mind. And again, let me repeat what Swamiji used to thunder. The way to heal the mind is to get out of the mind. What do? We sit there in meditation, and out of the unconscious come the Hridaya Granthi, the knots of the heart, and they rise. And I see this is just phenomena in the mind. It can be trivial, it can be traumatic, but all we do is become aware of it. I say, hold it in the light of compassionate awareness. And then these knots will loosen, and then they dissipate. Then we may have a period of peace. And then new material will come up out of the unconscious. The technical term for this is called kashaya, the vomiting up of the unconscious tendencies. But it's not a psychological process, or we can say it's a spiritual psychology, not just a mental psychology. Just don't do something, sit there. Any thoughts on this? All right, next verse.
Buddhihi buddhindriyaihi sadham savrittihi kartra lakshanaha vijnanamaya koshaha syat pumsaha samsara karanam. The intellect, with its modifications, along with the organs of perception, form the intellectual sheath, the Vijnanamaya kosha. It has the characteristics of the agent or doer, which is the cause for transmigration.
So the intellectual sheath can sometimes in other translations is translated as the knowledge sheath. Vijnana Maya kosha is comprised of the buddhi, the intellect, plus the buddhindriyas, he's calling them here. Sometimes they're called jnanendriyas, the organs of perception. And it's where the sense of agency is. Now, in the Vijnanamaya kosha, this is actually where egoism is. It's a function in the Vijnanamaya kosha. And it is this sense of agency. For example, I had some nuts for breakfast. I had a toasted cheese sandwich for lunch, and I had lentil soup for dinner. To whom did these experiences happen? I can say, to me. It didn't happen to Ganesh. What's the me to whom they happened? That coordinating faculty of agency and experiencer is an element in the Vijnanamaya kosha. Now listen very carefully. There's nothing wrong with the sense of agency in the Vijnanamaya kosha. You just have to know that it's not you. It is a function in the Vijnanamaya kosha. Let me repeat that. That sense of agency is a subtle function in the knowledge sheath, the intellectual sheath. It's what coordinates all the sense perceptions, all the mental activity, all the activity. It gives the sense that I do this and I do that. But what it is a function in the Vijnana Maya Kosha. Next verse.
Anuvrajya chitta pratibimba shaktihi vijnana sangyaha prakrite vikaraha jnana kriyavana aham ityajastram dehendriyadishva himanyate prasham, accompanied by a reflection of the light of Chit. The intellectual sheet is a modification of Prakriti. It is endowed with the function of knowledge, and it is always completely identified with the body, sense organs, etc.
So we have this idea of a reflection. The term usually used is chit chaya. Chaya in Sanskrit means both shadow and reflection. So what happens when consciousness shines on the Vijnanamaya Kosha, this apparent shadow self appears to arise. This image is so vivid because if you're outside in winter on a bright sunny day, even at noon, you stand on the sidewalk and you have a long shadow. But is your shadow a thing? No. The shadow is caused by the light striking your body, and then it creates the shadow. So this shadow self only appears when the attentive faculty is directed outward. If, on the other hand, you reverse the attentive faculty and you go looking for this shadow self, I am Jim. It is like shining a light on a shadow. What happens when you shine a light on a shadow? It's gone. This is the great power of Ramana Maharshi's exercise. Koham, who am I? So when consciousness strikes the Vijnanamaya Kosha and illumines the whole rest of the world, I am Jim, identified with my body. I am going here. I am going to do this. I see this. I feel that. I think this. Well, where is that I that's so involved with all that? Let me go looking for it. So in a very pure mind, with the attentive faculty introverted, go looking for this individual in the space between your thoughts. You see, there's nothing there. The chit chaya disappears. because it's a shadow self, a reflected self. Swamiji used to say, the reflection of consciousness caught in the web of thought. It's all the jiva, the individuality is. This is incredibly subtle teaching and incredibly powerful. Any thoughts or questions about it?
Jim, this is David. Can you remind me what prakriti means in this verse?
Prakriti means nature. It's made up of the stuff.
Thank you.
Read the English for me one more time of the whole verse.
Accompanied by a reflection of the light of Chit. The intellectual sheath is a modification of Prakriti.
Yes, it's just the stuff out of which name and form is made.
Thank you.
Phenomena. Another way I like to explain it. If you take your hands and make a tube and look through the tube, your peripheral vision is occluded. You can't see things. It is limited. That is like consciousness peering through the vijnana maya kosha to your individual perception of the world. But to stop the thoughting is like removing your hands. And oh, the vastness of your vision. How do I do that? I withdraw my attention from these various koshas. Purify the mind, have a sattvic mind, a zero filtered mind. Any other questions? Next verse.
Anadikalo yamaham svabhavo jivasamasta vyavahara goda karoti karmanya purvavasanaha punyani cha tatphalani bhunte vichitraspapi yonishu prajan nayati niryatyadha urdhvameshah asyaiva vijnanam ayasya jagrat swapnadhyavasthaha sukhadukha bhogah. It is without beginning, so the nature of the ego, and is called the jiva, which carries out the entire range of activities on the relative plane. It performs good and evil actions according to its previous vasanas and experiences their results. It comes and goes up and down, taking birth in various bodies. The waking, dream, and other states, and the experiences of joy and sorrow belong to this intellectual sheath.
So we have this term, the jiva, the sense of individuality. And some people think my jiva is going to somehow become Brahman. It's going to merge into Brahman. If I get better and better and better, then I'll become Brahman. No. What we must see is what the jiva is the light of awareness conditioned by the Vijnanamaya kosha, which makes the intellect think, I'm a person. And it comes and goes, up and down. I'm good, I'm bad, I'm successful, I'm a failure, I'm strong, I'm weak, I'm old, I'm young. It can get very, very thin when we are totally absorbed in an activity. This I-ness and minus gets very, very thin when you're listening to beautiful music or dancing or making love or concentrated on a project. It's only when you start having this self-reflective thought, how am I doing? Am I okay? Boy, this is great, or this is not great. So we see the Vijnanamaya kosha go through its modifications. Its three principal states are waking, dream, and deep sleep. It is this Vijnanamaya kosha that undergoes these modifications. In the waking state, I have the dream ego. I have the waking ego identified with the physical body. Dream state, I have a dream ego identified with the dream body. Deep sleep, nothing. Vijnanamaya kosha is all folded up. Here's the self ever shining. Here's the stuff, the prakriti. Waking state, dream state, deep sleep state. Pay close attention. Samadhi. And when the mind returns, oh my gosh, there's nothing there. Wow. That's what happens. That's what happens. Next verse.
Dehadinishta shramadharma karma gunabhimanam satatam mameti vijnana kosho ayamati prakashaha prakrishta sanidhya vashat paratmanaha ato bhavatyesha upadhirasya yadatmadhihi samsarati pramena. Identifying with the attributes of the order of life, their duties and functions, which actually belong to the body, it considers them as its own. The Vijnanamaya kosha is extremely radiant because of its nearness to the Supreme Self. There is superimposition on the Self, which, when it identifies with it, suffers transmigration through delusion.
Yes. So in the Vijnanamaya kosha, that is where I attribute to the self the qualities of the not self. That's where the superimposition takes place. Now, the Vijnanamaya kosha is incredibly radiant and incredibly subtle. I like to use this example. If If I give you a bowl that's filled with long grain rice and raisins, and I say, can you discriminate between the rice and the raisins? That's easy to do. You could pick them apart. Then if I said, yes, but what about if it's long grain rice and wild rice? Well, yeah, the wild rice is dark. The long grain rice is white. Yeah, I can do that. But what if I said, now discriminate between long grain rice and short grain rice? Well, that's harder. I have to really be able to look. And then if I were to say, can you discriminate between Minnesota long grain rice and Indian basmati rice? Oh, I'm not subtle enough to discriminate. So it's comparatively easy to see. I'm not a glass, I'm the dude looking at the glass. Actually, it's not that difficult to see. I'm not the body. I'm aware of the body, just like a pot. I get it. I'm not the energy. Don't get caught up in all the flows of energy and tingling and stuff like that. I'm not the energy. I'm not my feelings. I'm not my judgments. Not the mind. I'm not my thoughts. That's reasonably clear. Except the thought of self. Now, in Sanskrit, the word for ego is ahankara. Kara comes from the root kri, which means to make or to do. Aham is the first person pronoun. So you could say that the word ahankara is I maker thoughts. The constant flow of thoughts that give me the feeling that I'm a person. I'm good, I'm bad, I'm tall and short, and always identified, frequently unconsciously, with the body. I'm going to go to the store today. What is it that's going to the store? It's the body. Oh, I really messed up on that test today. Who messed up on the test? It was the body that did it. I called my boss at work today. Who made the call? That the body made that call. But if you stop and get still and in a purified mind with the attention introverted and the space between your thoughts, look, what's there? Do you see a person there? And that chit chaya, that shadow self, it's gone. It only appears to exist when you don't look at it. And it is this Vijnanamaya kosha, it is that sense of agency in it, in its delusion, that goes into the world of samsara with all its births and deaths and troubles and sorrows. And none of it touches the self. All right, next one.
Yoyam Vijnanamaya Praneshu Hridhi Spuratyayam Jyotihi Kutastha Saranatma Karta Bhokta Bhavatyupadhistha. The Atman, which is knowledge absolute, shines within the pranas in the heart. Though it is immutable, it becomes a doer in the experiencer because of its superimposition, the intellectual sheath.
So it doesn't really become the doer. It just seems to be the doer. And the heart here, this is a quotation, paraphrase from the Upanishads. It isn't our physical heart. It's not located in my chest. The spiritual heart is this union of the mind and the intellect, when all the feelings have subsided and there's supreme peace, and the intellect is supremely quiet and serene. A place of complete stillness. That's our spiritual heart. And in that space, the Atman shines, illuminating everything. Illuminating all the permutations of the Vijnanamaya kosha. Listen very carefully. Your mind or your intellect is not aware. You are awareness. You illumine mind and intellect. Next verse.
Swayam Paricheda Upetya Buddhe Tadatmayo Doshena Param Prashatmanah Sarvatmaka Sannapi Vikshate Swayam Patah Prathak Tvena Mrudo Ghataniva. This Atman, although it is a self in every existing thing, assumes the limitations of the intellect, and wrongly identifying with this entirely false entity, considers itself as something different, like the mud pots from the mud of which they are made.
So the identification happens in the Vijnanamaya kosha. This is a bit of a clumsy translation here. Remember, there's no agency in the self. The self is not deciding, oh, I'm this or I'm that. It's the intellect that has that. It's the intellect that has that. It's in the intellect that I attribute to the self the qualities of the non-self. It's in the intellect where I think, I feel I'm this or I'm that. And it's not just an opinion. It's akin to hypnotism. So if you go to Las Vegas and there's a stage hypnotist, he has someone get out of the audience and he hypnotizes them into thinking they're a chicken. And they run around the stage going, "Mark, Mark, Mark," and everybody's laughing. And then he brings them out of the hypnotic trance. Goes back to his seat, and his friend says, "Oh, that was so funny." And the guy says, "So weird. I was sure I was a chicken." Now, did he have to do chicken yoga to change from a chicken into a person? No. He had a trance-like state where he was convinced he was a chicken. How did he get rid of the chicken? Well, he never really was a chicken. He just had to wake up. So it's so important to understand we are not fixing the person. We're coming to see the person isn't real. Only the substratum, the ground of being is real. Beginningless, changeless, without form, without qualities, without end, like a shoreless ocean. Don't believe me? Look. Maybe you're a little gray ball with wings. Maybe you can find a person in there. But when the Vijnana Maya Kosha is covered by ignorance, rises up Jiva Bhavana. I think I'm a person. Oh, I'm so unhappy. I need this. I need that. And he did this to me. And she didn't do what I wanted her to do. I need mine, I need mine, I need mine, I need mine. And it seems so real. Ego always tells you to resolve the struggle of ego. Yoga says, drop it. Get out. All right, next one.
Upadhi sambandha vashat paratma Hyupadhi dharma nanubhati tadgunaha ayovikaram navikara navikari bhakni. Ayovikaran vikarabhakni sadaika rupopi parasvabhava. Even though the Supreme Self is by nature perfect and ever unchanging, due to its relationship with the superimpositions, it assumes the characteristics of these superimpositions and seems to act just as the equipment do, like the changeless fire, assuming the forms of the iron pieces, which it turns red hot.
Yes. So the metaphor here is the self is like the fire. The iron is like the upadhis, the conditionings, the various koshas. But when you take the cold, hard form of the iron and you put it in the fire, it borrows the dharma of the fire. and it gets red hot, and it starts to melt and lose its form. So also, the body, mind, intellect has no capacity to move, to feel, to think without its Brahman contact. But in the Vijnanamaya Kosha, I attribute to the self the qualities of the not-self. All right. Let's do one more.
It's a new section, Jim. What is liberation?
Okay, what's the next section called?
What is liberation?
Yes, okay, we will stop there.
What's
then.
the page number?
249.
Thanks.
And what verse are we on?
Sorry, it depends on if you have the new book or not.
What verse will we do next week?
192 and 193.
192 to 193. All right, so we have time for questions. This is a very, very subtle discussion. It's one of my favorite parts of the whole text. Anybody have any thoughts or questions or insights from it?
Jim, this is David again. I'm curious.
Hi, David again.
What are the differences between the mental sheath and the intellectual sheath, the Manomaya Kosha and the Vijnanamaya Kosha? I feel like I know that there's a difference in the feelings are attributed to the Manomaya Kosha, right? But there's a sense of belief, right? That's also part of the Manomaya Kosha.
I wouldn't worry about it, David. This is map, not territory. The thing to understand is this thing called the chitta, which is mind stuff, forms into various things. It forms into sense perception. It forms into feelings. It forms into memory. It forms into thoughts. And most specifically, it forms into this egoism. So you don't need to worry too much about, is this in the Manomaya Kosha or the Vijnanamaya Kosha? Don't worry about it. If it's changing, it's moving, if you can be aware of it, it's not you. Now, if you want the categorical distinctions between these, you can go back and simply reread the whole Manomaya Kosha section and the Vijnanamaya Kosha section with Swamiji's commentary. But I would say I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay, yeah, if there's no, if it's not much utility in that discrimination, or, you know, if it, as you say, it's map, not territory. It's kind of an arbitrary distinction of where one starts and the other one stops.
Yeah, and there are things like, okay, where are the organs of action? Are they in the physical body or are they in the mental body? Well, the thing to understand is you can run around in a dream. Therefore, we put them in both places. You know, do we put the organs of knowledge in the Vijnanamaya Kosha, or are they in the body? I see, I hear in the body. Well, actually, no. It's something that happens in a dream. So therefore, it happens at the subtle level. But are they in the Vijnanamaya Kosha or on the Manomaya Kosha? I wouldn't worry about it. You can go into that in detail and see how Shankara parses it out. And if you were to want to teach it, you should probably get familiar with it. But from your own understanding, the point is, none of this stuff is you. And by far, the two most important ideas The mind is the world and the world is the mind. And there's a whole lot of stuff. One is, if I'm disturbed, no matter the cause, no matter the cause, I'm the one who's taken the world as real. I'm the one who's taking the individuality as real. Nothing out there ever upsets me because there's nothing real out there. It's just the play of mind. And what is the ego sense? It's a function in the Vijnana Maya Kosha. I used to get all upset because I'd like be at dinner with Swamiji when he would, be doing a camp, and he would say, pass me the chutney, and I'm going, oh, he's ego identified. He's ego identified. I get all upset. No. That's just the function of the Vijnana Maya Kosha. It's no different than when you say, oh, what a beautiful sunset I saw last night. You didn't see a sunset, you saw an earth spin. And you've known that since grade school. But we still call it a sunset. But your knowledge is different. Is that making sense?
Yes. Oh, yeah, that definitely makes sense.
Yeah. So I am not the ego sense. It's just a coordinating function in the Vijnana Maya Kosha, in the subtlest part of the intellect. And it's why when Gloria goes out and has a day and the two of you get together and you say, what did you do today? Well, you don't know what she did today. Well, I'm the universal self. How come I don't know that? Because consciousness is peeping through her Vijnana Maya Kosha, and it's peeping through yours. It's the same light of consciousness. But the knowledge sheath is different. Good questions. Good questions.
Hi, Jim. This is Suseli. Can I just make a comment?
Please.
I just want to say and emphasize that subtlety, that how, I don't know how, but you've been saying this for almost onto my 4th year, and saying the same thing over and over. And I'm hearing it and I'm reading it and I'm writing about it. And it's just so subtle, like the difference in rice that you were making, that it's just how clever, I don't know if to call it clever, but how subtle the intellect to, I don't know how to say it really, but to orchestrate or to make me believe that.
What you're saying here is how powerful is Maya. That in spite of the fact that I see it, I can still get so damn deluded.
Yeah. And and in the division, like I could see that I'm not my mind and I'm not my body. And somehow it just dawned on me that like my memories are just another object of experience. And this is after a 2.5-day retreat with your favorite pupil. And I was just thinking, wow, I have said this. I have heard it chanting. I have heard it and see it in so many means of perception. And it was just so subtle that I just couldn't see it. And I thought, well, I'll give it a try and see if it's really like, now that I'm aware of it, like I can stop it. And I just said like, well, that's not real either, because there's no one here. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it, but it just worked.
The understanding is yours. You don't need to be able to put it in words, but it's clear that you had an insight.